Victoria Rossi's entire world, her future in medicine, her family's respectability, her very freedom, vanished when the black SUV pulled up to her lecture hall. Her father's catastrophic debts had just bought her a ticket into the heart of the Italian Mafia's most dangerous family, the Conti twins. Sold into marriage to not one but two identical men who made one thing crystal clear: there's no choosing between them. She belongs to both equally, completely. Now she's caught between Luciano's ice-cold calculation and Lorenzo's velvet-smooth danger, learning that loving two men isn't betrayal, it's survival, and perhaps her destiny. Victoria's hands wouldn't stop trembling. She sat in the back of a black Mercedes that probably cost more than her family's ancestral villa, watching Rome's ancient streets blur past through tinted windows. 48 hours ago, she'd been reviewing surgical procedures in the university library, her white coat still smelling of antiseptic and ambition. Now she was being driven to meet the men she'd been traded to. Traded. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Your father made certain investments, her uncle had told her 3 days ago. His aristocratic face grave, hands shaking as he poured grappa at noon. Investments with the Ndrangheta's money. Investments that failed catastrophically. The Conti twins have agreed to forgive the debt, all 18 million euros. In exchange, you will marry them. Them. Victoria had repeated, certain she'd misheard. Which one? Both of them, Cara. Both of them. At 23, Victoria had imagined her future with surgical precision. Medical degree, residency at Gemelli Hospital, perhaps research, perhaps a quiet marriage to someone who understood the demands of her calling. She'd pictured one life, one love, one clear path forward. Not this. The Mercedes glided through massive iron gates into an estate that looked like it had been carved from Renaissance dreams and modern nightmares. The Roman palazzo was all honey-colored stone and manicured gardens, ancient marble columns beside sleek security systems, beautiful and brutal and utterly terrifying. Two men stood at the entrance. Identical twins, both devastatingly handsome in that way that made Victoria's breath catch despite her fury. They had to be in their early 30s, tall and powerfully built, wearing bespoke suits that whispered of old money and new violence. Dark hair, sharp features, the kind of faces that belonged on ancient coins or modern wanted posters. But that's where the similarity ended. The one on the left smiled as she emerged from the car. Warm, dazzling, disarming. His posture was relaxed, welcoming, and when he spoke, his voice was cultured honey. Victoria. Finally. I'm Lorenzo. Welcome to your new home. Home. As if she'd chosen to be here. The one on the right didn't smile. His expression was controlled, watchful, his dark eyes scanning her like a threat assessment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but absolute. I'm Luciano. Inside. Now. Not a greeting. A command. Victoria followed them into a soaring atrium with frescoed ceilings and marble floors that had witnessed centuries of power. Everything was exquisite, priceless, cold. A Caravaggio hung casually in the hallway like a family photograph. I'm sure you have questions, Lorenzo said gently, gesturing for her to sit in a salon that belonged in a museum. This must be overwhelming. Overwhelming. Victoria's voice came out sharper than intended, her medical training demanding precision even in chaos. I was pulled for my final exams and informed I'm collateral for my father's mistakes. I have to marry two men I've never met. Overwhelming doesn't cover it. Luciano's expression didn't flicker. You weren't collateral. Your father made an agreement. An agreement I never consented to. And yet here you are. Luciano sat across from her, posture perfect, gaze unrelenting. Your father owed us 18 million euros. Money he lost gambling with funds he embezzled from our operations. The penalty for that is death. His, yours, your mother's, your younger brother's. We offered an alternative. Marriage to you in exchange for your entire family's protection. Permanent protection. Victoria's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in front of them. So I'm payment for his stupidity. You're a solution to a problem, Luciano said flatly. And an investment in our future. An investment? She laughed, the sound brittle. In what? In legitimacy, Lorenzo interjected, his voice softer. In family. In something beyond the life we were born into. He leaned forward, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and danger. I know this isn't what you wanted, Victoria. But it doesn't have to be a cage. We can build something real together. Real? How is any of this real? You can't just share a wife like she's a business asset. We don't see you as an asset, Lorenzo said quietly. We see you as ours. Both of ours. Equally. That's insane. That's our reality. Luciano's voice cut through her protest like a scalpel. Our father raised us to share everything. Every territory, every decision, every risk. We've run the Conti syndicate together since we were 21. We've never competed. Never divided what belongs to us both. I'm not a territory. No. Luciano's eyes held hers with frightening intensity. You're our wife. Which means you belong to both of us completely. There is no choosing between us. No playing favorites. No division. You are ours, and we are yours. That is the arrangement. That is non-negotiable. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against priceless marble. I need to think. I need air. Of course. Lorenzo rose smoothly, graceful as a diplomat. I'll show you to your rooms. You can rest, process everything. We'll have dinner together at 8. No pressure. Just time to talk properly. He led her up a sweeping marble staircase lined with family portraits, generations of Conti men with the same dark, uncompromising eyes, to a suite that was larger than her family's entire apartment. A 4-poster bed draped in silk. French doors opening onto a terrace overlooking Rome's glittering skyline. An adjoining bathroom with marble imported from Carrara. A walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her exact size. Designer labels she'd only seen in magazines. They'd been planning this. Preparing for her. She was expected. I know you're frightened, Lorenzo said softly from the doorway, his expression almost tender. But I promise you, Victoria, we will never harm you. You're safe here. And in time, I hope you'll see that this can be more than an arrangement. It can be real. He left, closing the door gently behind him. Victoria walked to the terrace, gripping the iron railing as Rome spread before her like a kingdom of saints and sinners. Then she finally let herself break, sliding down against the cool stone, and cried for the future she'd lost and the terrifying unknown that had just claimed her. Dinner was surreal. Victoria sat at a table that could seat 20, with Lorenzo on her left and Luciano on her right, and tried to remember how to breathe. Victoria woke to unfamiliar silk against her skin and sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For one merciful second, she thought it had all been a nightmare. Then she saw the photograph on the nightstand. Lorenzo and Luciano flanking an older man with the same unforgiving eyes, all three in perfectly tailored suits, and reality crashed back with nauseating clarity. She was in the Conti Palazzo. She was their wife. Both of theirs. A soft knock preceded the door opening. A middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform entered carrying a tray. Buongiorno, Signora Conti. I'm Maria, the head housekeeper. The signori requested I bring you breakfast and help you settle in. Her Italian was formal, respectful, but her eyes held something that looked like pity. Where are they? Victoria asked, pulling the silk robe tighter around herself. Signor Lorenzo is in meetings. Signor Luciano is in the security office. Maria set the tray down. Espresso, cornetti, fresh fruit arranged like art. They asked me to show you the private wing when you're ready. Your things from home arrived this morning. Victoria's throat tightened. Her things. As if moving a few suitcases could transplant her entire life into this gilded cage. The private wing occupied the entire third floor of the palazzo. Maria led her through a maze of corridors lined with Renaissance art and modern security cameras, finally stopping at a set of double doors carved with the Conti family crest. "This is the master suite," Maria said carefully. "The signori share this floor. Your medical textbooks and personal items are already inside." Victoria pushed open the doors and stopped breathing. The suite was enormous, a central living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Rome, furnished with pieces that belonged in auction houses. But it was the bedroom beyond that made her stomach drop. One massive bed, custom-built, easily large enough for three. The silk sheets were the color of dark wine. On either side stood identical nightstands, but the personal items on them were distinctly different. On the left, a worn copy of Machiavelli's The Prince, a vintage watch, reading glasses. Lorenzo's side. On the right, a tactical knife in a leather sheath, a rosary with black beads, nothing else. Luciano's side. And in the center of the headboard, a space clearly meant for her. "The signori had the bed commissioned specifically," Maria said quietly. "They wanted you to be comfortable." Comfortable. In a bed designed for 3 people. Victoria walked to the windows, needing air, needing distance from that bed and what it represented. Her medical textbooks were stacked neatly on a desk that probably cost more than a year's tuition. Her laptop, her notes, her white coat hanging in a closet beside designer gowns she'd never chosen. They'd taken her entire life and redecorated it. "There are 2 additional bedrooms in the wing," Maria offered, reading her panic. "If you prefer." "That won't be necessary." Luciano's voice came from the doorway, cold and absolute. He'd changed into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms marked with scars. His eyes swept the room, cataloging Victoria's position by the window, her defensive posture, the way Maria had stepped slightly between them. "Thank you, Maria. That will be all." The housekeeper left quickly. Victoria forced herself to hold Luciano's gaze. "I want my own room." "No. You can't just." "We can. We did." He moved into the room with predatory grace, and Victoria noticed the weapon holstered at his hip, barely concealed. "You're our wife, Victoria. You sleep in our bed. Not negotiable." "Everything about this is negotiable," she shot back, anger finally overtaking fear. "You can't force me to." "Force." Luciano's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "We're not animals. You'll share our bed. What happens in it is your choice. But you don't get separate quarters. You don't get to pretend this arrangement is temporary. You're a Conti now. Act like it. I'm a prisoner. You're protected." He stepped closer, and she smelled gunpowder and expensive aftershave. "Your father's enemies are numerous. The families who lost money in his schemes want blood. You think we put you in this wing for our entertainment? This floor is the most secure location in Rome. Bulletproof glass. Reinforced walls. Armed guards at every entrance. You stay here because keeping you alive is now our primary responsibility." Victoria's medical training kicked in, analyzing the situation clinically. Luciano wasn't touching her, wasn't threatening her physically. But his presence was a threat in itself. Controlled, dangerous, absolute. "And if I refuse? Then you die. Your mother dies. Your 17-year-old brother dies." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "Your father's debt didn't disappear because you signed a marriage contract. It disappeared because we chose to absorb it. That protection is conditional on your cooperation. So I'm still payment. Your investment insurance." Luciano tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle to solve. "Lorenzo thinks you'll come to care for us. I'm more realistic. I don't need your love, Victoria. I need your presence, your compliance, and eventually your loyalty. The rest is optional." "How romantic." "I'm not the romantic. That's Lorenzo's department. Luciano moved to the desk, picking up one of her medical textbooks. Cardiac surgery. Ambitious. You were top of your class. I was. Past tense. Bitter. You still are. Your professors at Sapienza received a very generous donation from the Conti Foundation this morning. You'll continue your studies remotely for now. When it's safe, you'll return to clinical rotations. We don't keep our possessions locked away from their purpose. Victoria blinked. You're letting me finish medical school? We're ensuring you finish medical school. You have value beyond this marriage, Victoria. We intend to cultivate it, not waste it. He set the textbook down. Lorenzo believes in gentle persuasion. I believe in clear expectations. Here are yours. You live in this wing. You sleep in that bed. You present as our wife at public functions. In exchange, you get your education, your family's safety, and resources most people only dream of. You betray us, you run, you undermine our authority, and the deal is void. Understood. She wanted to throw something at him. She wanted to scream. Instead, she straightened her spine and met his cold gaze. Understood. Good. Luciano moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The panic button by the bed isn't for us. It's for you. Anything threatens you, anyone makes you uncomfortable, you press it. We come. Always. That's the one promise I'll make you, Dottoressa. You're ours to protect now. He left without waiting for a response. Victoria stood alone in the enormous suite, surrounded by luxury she'd never wanted and security she'd never needed until her father's mistakes had made her a target. She looked at the massive bed, at the space waiting for her between Lorenzo's intellectualism and Luciano's brutality, and wondered which would destroy her first, the fear, or the fact that some treacherous part of her had noticed how Luciano called her Dottoressa like it mattered. The door opened again. Lorenzo this time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression of carefully crafted warmth. I heard Luciano was welcoming you to the wing. I thought I'd offer a gentler orientation. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. Would you like to see the library? I think you'll find our collection quite extensive. And perhaps we could discuss your thesis? I have connections at several research hospitals. Victoria looked between the bed and the door, between the cage and the key, and made the only choice she could. Show me the library. Lorenzo's smile widened. With pleasure, Cara. With pleasure. Lorenzo courted her in sunlight and sophistication. The week after her arrival, he took her to La Pergola, Rome's only 3 Michelin-star restaurant, where the maitre d' greeted him by name and the sommelier presented wines that cost more than Victoria's former monthly rent. You studied biochemistry before medical school, Lorenzo said, swirling a Brunello that caught the candlelight like liquid rubies. Tell me, what drew you to cardiac surgery specifically? She found herself answering, drawn into a discussion about cellular regeneration and arterial grafting that made her forget, briefly, that this wasn't a date but an arrangement. Lorenzo listened like her words mattered, challenged her theories with the precision of someone who'd educated himself specifically to match her intellect. When he walked her through the Borghese gardens afterward, his hand at the small of her back was warm, proprietary, careful. He showed her the beautiful face of their power. Private tours of the Vatican museums after hours, where cardinals nodded respectfully to Lorenzo and she stood before Caravaggio's works without crowds pressing close. A weekend in Florence where they stayed in a Renaissance palazzo the Conti family had owned for 3 centuries, and Lorenzo read Dante to her in the original Italian, his voice turning poetry into seduction. He bought her first editions of medical texts she'd only seen in university archives, presented them over espresso in cafes where everyone knew his name and no one dared interrupt. You see, Lorenzo said one evening on their private terrace, Rome glittering below like an empire of stars, this life doesn't have to be a punishment, Victoria. It can be extraordinary. Luciano courted her in shadows and silence. She began noticing him in places she hadn't expected. standing outside her lecture hall when she attended her remote clinical session at Sapienza, his presence ensuring no one approached her with anything but respect. Waiting in the palazzo's garage when she returned from shopping with Maria, his eyes cataloging every package, every interaction, memorizing threats she hadn't even seen. He didn't speak unnecessarily. But one night when she couldn't sleep and wandered to the library at 2 a.m., she found him there, cleaning a disassembled pistol with methodical precision. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "I don't sleep much." He didn't look up from his work. "Sit." She did, curling into the leather chair opposite him. The silence stretched, comfortable in its honesty. Finally, Luciano spoke. "The Rossetti family made inquiries about you last week. They lost $4 million in your father's scheme." Victoria's blood went cold. "What happened?" "I sent them a message." His hands moved with lethal grace, reassembling the weapon. "They won't inquire again." "What kind of message?" Luciano's eyes finally met hers, and she saw something raw beneath the ice. "The kind that makes it clear you're untouchable. You're ours, Victoria. That means anyone who threatens you answers to me." He set the gun aside. "Lorenzo shows you what we can give you. I show you what we'll do to keep you." 2 weeks later, she woke to find Luciano standing by the bedroom window at dawn, watching the grounds with predator stillness. When she approached, he handed her an espresso without being asked, prepared exactly how she took it. No words. Just the knowledge that he'd learned her preferences, memorized her patterns, made her safety his religion. Victoria stood between them, Lorenzo's light and Luciano's shadow, and felt herself being pulled in two directions that should have torn her apart but somehow, terrifyingly, felt like becoming whole. The attack came on a Tuesday evening, so ordinary that Victoria would later marvel at how quickly safety became survival. She was returning from a university library with Maria, their car winding through Rome's narrow streets as twilight painted the ancient buildings gold. The checkpoint guards at the palazzo gates waved them through with familiar efficiency. Victoria was reviewing her notes on myocardial infarction when the explosion shattered the evening quiet. Their car lurched violently. Maria screamed. Through the smoke, Victoria saw 3 men emerging from a black van, weapons raised. Her medical training catalogued everything in crystalline detail. The tactical vests, the coordinated movements, the professional efficiency of an assassination team. Then Luciano was there, moving with lethal precision she'd only glimpsed before. He'd appeared from nowhere, weapon drawn, his body positioning itself between her and the shooters before her mind could even process the threat. His first 3 shots dropped 2 men. The third dove for cover. "Get down!" Luciano's command was absolute. He pulled Victoria from the car as bullets punched through metal and glass, covering her body with his own. She felt his heart hammering against her back, felt the controlled violence in every movement as he returned fire. Lorenzo's voice came through Luciano's radio, controlled but urgent. "I'm 30 seconds out. Hold position." "Get her inside," Luciano said into the device, then to Victoria. "When I move, you run for the gate. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You run. Dottoressa. Now." He shoved her toward the gate and stepped into the open, drawing fire away from her retreat. Victoria ran, her legs moving before her mind could protest. But at the gate, she turned back, her heart seizing as she watched Luciano advance on the remaining shooter with terrifying calm. Then Lorenzo's car screeched through the entrance, and he was out, moving to flank the attacker with the synchronized precision of someone who'd fought beside his brother 1,000 times. Together, they were devastating. Lorenzo's controlled shots, Luciano's aggressive assault, the wordless communication between them. The last shooter fell. Silence crashed down like a weight. Victoria's legs gave out. She collapsed against the gate's stone pillar, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't stop them. Both twins were there instantly, Luciano checking her for injuries with rough efficiency while Lorenzo's hands cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. "You're safe," Lorenzo said. You're safe, Cara. We have you. But it wasn't safety she felt. It was clarity, sharp and undeniable. They had both come for her. Luciano had shielded her body with his own. Lorenzo had abandoned whatever meeting he'd been in to race toward danger. Not because she was an asset or an arrangement. Because she was theirs, and they would die before they let her be harmed. Take me inside, she whispered, her voice steadier than her hands. Both of you. Take me inside. They understood. She saw the realization dawn in Lorenzo's eyes, the predatory satisfaction in Luciano's. They lifted her between them, carrying her through the palazzo's halls to the private wing, to that massive bed she'd been avoiding for weeks. Lorenzo's touch was reverent, his kisses gentle persuasion as he undressed her with shaking hands. Tell me you want this, he whispered against her throat. Tell me you choose this. I choose this, Victoria said, and meant it with terrifying certainty. I choose both of you. Luciano's possession was fierce, demanding, his hands mapping her body like territory to defend. But when he kissed her, there was something devastating in his intensity. Something that felt like devotion translated into touch. They loved her together, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. Lorenzo's tenderness balanced Luciano's ferocity. Luciano's raw passion deepened Lorenzo's careful worship. They moved around her with her, creating something she had no words for. Not just pleasure but belonging, not just desire but completion. When it was over, she lay between them in the bed that had been built for this exact purpose. Lorenzo's fingers threading through her hair while Luciano's hand rested possessively on her hip. Rome glittered beyond the windows, and Victoria finally understood what she'd been fighting. Not imprisonment. Inevitability. You're ours now, Luciano said into the darkness, and it wasn't a demand. I know, Victoria whispered back. And you're both mine. The guilt came 3 weeks later, sharp and unexpected as a scalpel between her ribs. Victoria stood on the terrace watching Lorenzo negotiate with a Spanish shipping magnate in the garden below. He moved through the conversation like a conductor leading an orchestra. Charming, persuasive, turning potential conflict into partnership with nothing but words and that devastating smile. She felt pride watching him, admiration for the brilliant mind that could navigate a dozen languages and 100 political landmines without breaking stride. When he glanced up and caught her watching, the warmth in his eyes made her heart lift like sunlight breaking through clouds. That night, Luciano returned from whatever dark errand had taken him to Naples. He said nothing about where he'd been, but Victoria saw the blood on his knuckles before he washed it away, saw the controlled violence still simmering beneath his skin. When he pulled her against him in the darkness, his touch was possessive, claiming, and she felt safe in a way that had nothing to do with gentle words and everything to do with knowing he would burn the world down before letting it touch her. Her pulse quickened against his palm, her body responding to the dangerous promise in his hands. The feelings were different. Completely, devastatingly different. And the realization was crushing her. She found Lorenzo in the library the next morning, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than a semester's tuition. Can I ask you something? Her voice came out smaller than intended. Always, Cara. He set down his espresso, giving her his complete attention in that way that made her feel like the only person in the world. Do you ever worry that? She struggled for words. That what I feel for you and what I feel for Luciano aren't the same. That I'm failing one of you by loving you differently? Lorenzo's expression softened. He crossed to her, tilting her chin up with gentle fingers. Victoria, do you love us the same way? No. The admission felt like confession and crime. With you I feel elevated. Like I can be the brilliant, ambitious person I always wanted to be. You make me think, challenge me, show me beauty and possibility. You're my guide through all of this. The public face, the intellectual equal, the man who makes me believe this life can be extraordinary. Tears burned her eyes. But with Luciano, it's different. It's raw. I feel protected, anchored, like he's the dark truth beneath all the beautiful lies. He doesn't make me better. He makes me real. He sees every ugly, frightened part of me and guards it anyway. And you think that inequality hurts us? Lorenzo's smile was understanding, not wounded. Tesoro, you've just described exactly what we need from you. I don't understand. Come with me. He led her to the bedroom where Luciano was checking the security feeds, his presence a controlled threat even in stillness. Brother, Victoria has something she needs to hear. From both of us. Luciano's eyes shifted to her, reading the distress in her posture. What's wrong? She thinks loving us differently is a betrayal, Lorenzo said. Luciano stood, and for a moment Victoria saw the mirror of them. Identical features expressing completely different things. Lorenzo's warmth and Luciano's ice, both focused entirely on her. Do you know why we chose you? Luciano asked quietly. Not just accepted your father's arrangement, but chose you specifically? Victoria shook her head. Because we're not the same person, Victoria, Lorenzo said. We never have been. I need someone who can stand beside me in boardrooms and ballrooms, who can match my mind and challenge my strategies. I need light and brilliance and partnership. I need someone who understands that power requires darkness, Luciano continued. Who won't flinch from what I do to protect what's mine. I need loyalty that goes bone deep, trust that doesn't require pretty words. We don't want you to love us the same, Lorenzo said, taking her left hand. We want you to love us as we are. You're my North Star, Victoria whispered, squeezing Lorenzo's fingers. The one who guides me, shows me the way forward. And I'm your shadow, Luciano said, taking her right hand. The one who follows, protects, eliminates threats you'll never see. You complete us separately, Lorenzo said. That's the entire point, Cara. Your different loves for different men make this whole thing work. Victoria looked between them, her guide and her guardian, her light and her darkness, and felt the guilt shatter like glass. I love you both, she said. Differently. Completely. Good, Luciano said, pulling her close. That's exactly how this was always meant to be. The charity gala at Villa Medici was supposed to be a statement. Lorenzo had orchestrated it meticulously, the Conti family stepping into legitimate high society, a fundraiser for cardiac research that would put Victoria at the center as both wife and future surgeon. She wore Valentino couture the color of blood, diamonds at her throat that had belonged to Lorenzo's grandmother, and Luciano's constant shadow 3 steps behind her. You're radiant tonight, Lorenzo murmured as they moved through the crowd of Italian politicians and business elite. His hand rested at the small of her back, guiding her through conversations in 4 languages. They're already calling you the Princess of Rome. Victoria smiled, but something felt wrong. She'd learned to trust Luciano's instincts over the past months, and tonight he was too still, too watchful. His eyes never stopped scanning faces, exits, hands. The violinist was raising his bow for the first dance when Luciano moved. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Victoria saw Luciano's body shift, saw him reach for her as the waiter, wrong posture, wrong movement, pulled a weapon from beneath his tray. Lorenzo was already pushing her down, but Luciano was faster. His body slamming into hers, covering her completely as the shot cracked through the ballroom's elegant air. Luciano jerked. Victoria felt the impact through his chest, felt his weight collapse against her as screams erupted and Lorenzo's return fire dropped the shooter. More gunfire. More screams. The Alvarez cartel's coordinated attack unfolding with lethal precision across the villa. Luciano. Victoria's training kicked in before her terror could. She was already assessing, entry wound high right chest, exit wound through the back, possible lung collapse, definite arterial bleed. His blood was hot and spreading fast, soaking through his shirt, her dress, pooling on the marble floor. Get her out, Luciano gasped to Lorenzo, but Victoria was already ripping off her €1,000 gown, wadding the fabric against the exit wound. I'm not going anywhere. Her voice was steel. Lorenzo, I need your belt. Nah. And someone get me a tablecloth, a phone, and every first aid kit in this building. Lorenzo hesitated only a second before moving, barking orders in Italian while keeping his weapon trained on the ballroom entrances. Security was pouring in, engaging the remaining attackers, but Victoria's entire world had narrowed to the man bleeding beneath her hands. Pneumothorax, she muttered, pressing harder as Luciano's breathing turned ragged. Possible hemothorax. Luciano, stay with me. Look at me. His eyes were unfocused, his skin already too pale. That's an order, Shadow. You don't get to die for me. Not dying, he managed. Just paying the price. Shut up and let me work. She used Lorenzo's belt as a tourniquet, her hand steady despite the terror screaming through her veins. Someone thrust a tablecloth at her. She packed the wound, applied pressure, calculated blood loss and time to hospital. Too much. Too long. Lorenzo, tell the ambulance we need O-negative, surgical team on standby, and someone to clear every red light between here and Gemelli Hospital. Her voice was command, not request. And get me a pen. She performed an emergency needle decompression using a ballpoint pen and her medical knowledge, piercing Luciano's chest wall to release the pressure collapsing his lung. His gasp was agonizing, but his breathing eased slightly. Dottoressa, Luciano whispered, and she saw something like awe in his fading gaze. I told you, Victoria said fiercely, maintaining pressure on the wound while monitoring his pulse. You're mine. Both of you are mine. And I don't let go of what's mine. Lorenzo dropped beside them, his hands covering hers, his face stricken. The ambulance is 2 minutes out. The attackers are neutralized. You saved him, Victoria. You saved him. Not yet, she said. But I will. She rode in the ambulance, still covered in Luciano's blood, barking orders at the paramedics with the authority of someone who'd just discovered exactly what she was capable of. Lorenzo followed in the car, making calls that would ensure his brother received the best care in Italy. In the hospital corridor, waiting while surgeons fought to save Luciano's life, Victoria finally let herself shake. Lorenzo pulled her against him, and she realized she was still wearing one diamond earring and nothing else but blood-soaked undergarments and someone's borrowed coat. They targeted me, she whispered. To get to you. To weaken the family. Yes. Lorenzo's voice was rough. They identified you as our vulnerability. Then they miscalculated. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. Because I'm not your weakness, Lorenzo. I'm about to become your greatest weapon. Luciano survived surgery but remained in ICU for 3 days. Victoria barely left his bedside, sleeping in the chair between his bed and the armed guards Lorenzo had posted at every entrance. She was reviewing his latest labs when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The attached video made her blood turn to ice. Lorenzo and Luciano, bound to chairs in what looked like a warehouse. Both bloodied. Both alive. A distorted voice. Your husband's for you, Signora Conti. Come alone to the Ostia docks. Warehouse 7, midnight tonight. Tell anyone, and we send them back in pieces. Victoria's hands shook as she watched the video loop. Luciano was still recovering. This had to be faked. But the bruising on Lorenzo's face looked fresh, and the fear clawing through her chest didn't care about logic. She checked the timestamp. 6 hours old. If they'd taken Lorenzo while she sat here. Her mind raced through possibilities with surgical precision. Tell the guards. They'd never let her go. Call the Conti security team. They'd mobilize and possibly trigger the execution. Wait for confirmation. And waste time if it was real. She thought of Luciano bleeding on the ballroom floor, of Lorenzo's hands covering hers, of the way they'd both claimed her as theirs, protected her, loved her differently but completely. They would die for her. She'd already watched one of them take a bullet. Now it was her turn. Victoria pulled on dark clothes, pocketed the scalpel she'd taken from the hospital supply room, and studied the guard rotation she'd memorized over 3 days. At shift change, there was a 90-second gap. She slipped out through the service stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. The taxi to Ostia took 40 minutes. Victoria spent them composing a text she'd set to send on delay, explaining everything to the Conti family lawyer. If this was a trap, when this was a trap, someone would know where to find her body. Warehouse 7 loomed against the night sky, corroded and abandoned. Victoria approached with her hands raised, weaponless except for the scalpel hidden in her boot. The massive door stood open like a mouth. Inside, a single light illuminated a man she recognized from intelligence photos Lorenzo had shown her. Mateo Alvarez, head of the cartel that had been systematically trying to destroy the Conti Empire. He sat behind a card table, smoking, relaxed as if he owned the world. Signora Conti. His Italian was accented but clear. Punctual. I appreciate that in a woman. Where are my husbands? Victoria's voice was steadier than her pulse. Not here. Alvarez smiled. Did you really think we captured 2 Conti twins? Impossible. But we knew you'd come anyway. You're the weakness we've been looking for. The heart they didn't have until you. Victoria's stomach dropped. The video was faked. She'd walked straight into a trap. But she lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of the defiance she'd learned from loving dangerous men. Then you wasted your time. Kill me, and you'll have 2 Conti twins hunting you with nothing left to lose. I'm not their weakness. I'm the only thing keeping them civilized. Oh, I'm not going to kill you, Cara. Alvarez stood, circling her like a predator. I'm going to use you. Messages written in your blood, videos of your suffering, sent to your husbands until they're broken and desperate. Then when they come for you, and they will, we'll be waiting. Victoria thought of the scalpel in her boot, of Luciano's cold efficiency, of Lorenzo's brilliant strategies, of everything they'd taught her about survival in their world. You made one mistake, she said quietly. Oh. And what's that? You assumed I came alone. Alvarez's smile faltered. He turned toward the warehouse shadows just as the lights blazed on, revealing armed men positioned throughout the rafters, the entrances, every exit blocked. And stepping from the darkness, both looking like avenging angels despite Luciano's bandaged chest and Lorenzo's cold fury, came her husbands. Victoria had never seen anything more beautiful. Actually, Lorenzo said, his voice silk over steel as he approached with a gun trained on Alvarez. She did come alone. We've been tracking her phone since she left the hospital. Did you really think we wouldn't notice our wife attempting to sacrifice herself? Luciano moved to Victoria, checking her for injuries with rough, possessive hands. Foolish daughteressa, he murmured. Brave but foolish. You were bait, Victoria realized, looking at Alvarez's dawning horror. I was bait. This whole thing was a trap, Lorenzo confirmed. For him. We've been trying to draw Alvarez out of hiding for months. We just needed the right motivation. His smile was deadly. Thank you, Tesoro, for being predictable in your devotion. Victoria didn't know whether to kiss them or kill them herself. Alvarez moved fast for a man who just realized he was surrounded. His hand went for the weapon at his hip, but Luciano was faster, his shot precise despite the bandages still wrapped around his chest. The gun clattered across the concrete floor. Alvarez dropped to his knees, clutching his shattered hand, his scream echoing through the warehouse. That was for the gala, Luciano said coldly, advancing with predatory grace. For making my wife watch me bleed. Lorenzo circled from the other side, his weapon steady. His expression the cultivated calm that Victoria had learned meant he was at his most dangerous. Mateo Alvarez. We've been trying to have this conversation for 18 months. You're very good at hiding behind proxies and shell companies. But everyone has a weakness. His eyes flicked to Victoria. Even us. You used me, Victoria said, anger and admiration warring in her chest. You knew I'd come. We knew you loved us enough to try to save us, Lorenzo corrected. The question was whether Alvarez would be arrogant enough to handle this personally instead of sending more disposable soldiers. He smiled at the cartel leader. Turns out he was. Alvarez spat blood. You think this ends anything? My organization is currently being dismantled, Lorenzo interrupted smoothly. While you were busy setting your trap for my wife, we were seizing your shipping routes, freezing your accounts, and presenting evidence of your operation to every law enforcement agency from here to Madrid. Your lieutenants are already negotiating immunity in exchange for testimony. Your empire ends tonight, Luciano added. The only question is whether you walk out of here in handcuffs or a body bag. Victoria watched them work, Lorenzo's words and Luciano's violence, diplomacy and threat, two sides of the same lethal coin. This was who they were beneath the silk sheets and tender touches. This was the truth of the world she'd married into. Alvarez's eyes found hers, desperate and calculating. You're a doctor. You took an oath. First, do no harm. That oath, Victoria said quietly, stepping forward, applies to my patients. You're not my patient. You're the man who tried to murder my husband, who would have tortured me to break them, who threatened everything I've built here. She crouched to his level, her voice dropping to surgical precision. I'm not here to heal you, Señor Alvarez. I'm here to watch you fall. Something like respect flickered in Lorenzo's eyes. Luciano's hand found the small of her back, possessive and proud. Polizia are 2 minutes out, one of the Conti soldiers reported. Everything's documented. The evidence is clean. Lorenzo holstered his weapon, smoothing his suit jacket as if he'd been at the opera instead of orchestrating the fall of a criminal empire. Matteo, it's been educational. Victoria, Tesoro, we should go. You're still technically supposed to be at the hospital, and the doctors are going to have questions about Luciano's missing patient. You left the hospital, Victoria said to Luciano. 3 days post-op with a chest tube still in. To save you from yourself. His hand tightened on her hip. Worth it. They walked out of the warehouse as sirens wailed in the distance, leaving Alvarez to the authorities and the carefully constructed evidence that would ensure he'd never threaten them again. Victoria was flanked by both twins, their bodies forming a protective triangle that had become as natural as breathing. In the car, Lorenzo took her hand. You're angry. You manipulated me. We protected you, Luciano countered. We tracked you. Surrounded you with our best soldiers. You were never in real danger. I thought you were captured. I thought I might die. Yes. Lorenzo's thumb traced circles on her palm. And you came anyway. You were willing to trade your life for ours without hesitation. His voice softened. Do you understand what that means to us, Victoria? What you've proven. She looked between them, her North Star and her shadow, her guide and her guardian, and felt the anger dissolve into something more complex. That I'm as ruthless as you are. That I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. Exactly, Luciano said, pulling her against him despite the pain it must have caused his healing wound. You're not a liability anymore, Dottoressa. You're a Conti. Completely. Victoria leaned into him, then reached for Lorenzo's hand, holding both of them. Next time you use me as bait, I want to know the plan. Lorenzo laughed, genuine and warm. Deal. Rome glittered around them as they drove home to the palazzo, to the massive bed and the life she'd stopped fighting, and Victoria realized she wouldn't trade this dangerous, complicated love for anything the safe world had ever offered her. 2 years later, Victoria stood in the palazzo's garden watching her daughters toddle through the roses with Maria hovering protectively nearby. Alessia had Lorenzo's diplomatic charm even at 18 months, offering flowers to the guards with that devastating smile. Sofia had Luciano's watchful intensity, studying everything with dark, suspicious eyes before deciding it was safe. They're perfect, Lorenzo said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine from their new Tuscan vineyard. Just like their mother. Victoria accepted the glass, leaning into his warmth. She'd finished her medical degree 8 months pregnant, defended her thesis with Sophia and Alessia literally kicking inside her, and now split her time between consulting at Gemelli Hospital and managing the Conti Foundation's cardiac research initiatives. The foundation was legitimate, prestigious, and carefully designed to distance the family from its darker origins. The Sao Paulo deal closed this morning, Lorenzo continued. That's the last of the South American shipping contracts. We're officially out of that business entirely. And the properties in Sicily? Converted to luxury resorts. Groundbreaking is next month. He sipped his wine, satisfaction evident in his posture. In 5 years, the Conti name will be associated with wine, real estate, and philanthropy. Nothing else. It had been Lorenzo's vision. A complete legitimization of the family empire. For their daughters. For Victoria. For a future where Alessia and Sophia wouldn't inherit enemies and blood debts along with their trust funds. Luciano emerged from the house carrying Sophia, who'd apparently decided walking was beneath her dignity. He'd been in meetings all morning with lawyers, accountants, and government officials. The unglamorous work of transforming a criminal syndicate into a legitimate corporation. The violence he'd once wielded so efficiently was now reserved for protecting what they'd built, not expanding it. The Andrangheta leadership accepted our terms, Luciano reported, settling Sophia on his hip. We maintain neutrality. They leave our businesses alone. Anyone who violates that agreement answers to both organizations. They agreed because they're afraid of you, Victoria said. They agreed because we demonstrated we're more valuable as allies than enemies. But Luciano's slight smile suggested her assessment wasn't entirely wrong. Alessia shrieked with delight as a butterfly landed on her outstretched hand. Both twins moved instinctively toward their daughter. Lorenzo's hand on Victoria's back, Luciano already calculating threats in the garden's shadows, and Victoria felt the familiar warmth of being caught between her two loves, different but complementary. Dr. Conti, Maria called from the terrace. The hospital called. They need your consultation on the transplant case. Victoria handed Lorenzo her wine glass. Tell them I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'll drive you, Luciano said immediately, already passing Sophia to Lorenzo. The protective instinct would probably never fade, even now that the worst threats had been neutralized or converted into business partners. Lorenzo gathered both daughters, one in each arm. We'll be here when you return, Tesoro. Probably covered in garden soil and demanding gelato. Victoria kissed each daughter, then each husband, still marveling at how natural it had become. I love you, she told them. All 4 of you. 5, Lorenzo corrected, his hand moving to her still flat stomach where their third child, this time a son, was barely 8 weeks along. They'd told no one yet, savoring the secret between the 3 of them. In the car, Luciano drove with one hand while his other rested possessively on Victoria's thigh. You're happy, he observed. Not a question. Deliriously, she admitted. I have my career, my children, my husbands who are slowly becoming respectable businessmen. Slowly, Luciano emphasized. And a life that's somehow both everything I never wanted and everything I needed. She covered his hand with hers. 2 years ago, I thought this arrangement would destroy me. Now I can't imagine existing any other way. The legitimate businesses are for them, Luciano said, nodding toward the palazzo where their daughters played in safety. But we're still dangerous men, Victoria. That doesn't change just because we're selling wine instead of moving cargo. I know. And she did. She'd seen Lorenzo negotiate deals that left competitors ruined with nothing but words and contracts. She'd watched Luciano ensure threats disappeared before they materialized. They were building something beautiful on a foundation of calculated ruthlessness. But now that danger protects something worth protecting. That's the difference. Luciano pulled her hand to his lips. Our North Star, he murmured, leading us toward the light. And my shadow, Victoria replied. making sure nothing follows us out of the darkness. They drove toward the hospital through Rome's ancient streets, toward the life she'd chosen and the future they were building together, and Victoria had never felt more completely, dangerously, perfectly home. The threat came 3 years later, when Alessia and Sofia were 4 and their brother Marco was 18 months old. Ricardo Alvarez, Mateo's son, who'd been in Argentina when his father fell, had spent those years building his own operation, nursing his hatred, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He chose the family yacht. The Contis were spending August on the Amalfi Coast, a week of supposed normalcy where the twins could be just fathers instead of former mafia leaders turned legitimate businessmen. Victoria was reading in the salon while Marco napped, the girls splashing in the deck pool under Maria's supervision, when Luciano's entire body went rigid. "Get the children below deck," he said quietly, his hand already on the weapon he still carried despite the legitimization. "Now!" Victoria moved instantly, years of living in their world having honed her instincts to razor sharpness. She scooped up Marco while Lorenzo collected the girls, both moving with choreographed precision toward the yacht's reinforced safe room. 2 speedboats approaching from the east, Luciano reported into his radio. Hostile formation. Ricardo Alvarez confirmed on the lead boat. Victoria's blood turned to ice. She'd read the intelligence reports. Ricardo was more reckless than his father, more violent, and he'd made his intentions clear through intercepted communications. The Conti children for his father's imprisonment. A son for a father. "The safe room," Lorenzo said, but Victoria was already shaking her head. "No. He'll breach it eventually, and then we're trapped." Her mind raced with surgical precision. "We end this. Today. Permanently." Both twins looked at her, and she saw the moment they recognized what she was suggesting. Not defense. Offense. "Tell me the plan," Luciano said. Victoria laid it out in 60 seconds. Ricardo wanted the children, which meant he needed them alive. He'd board the yacht, search methodically, expect them to be hiding. "We give him what he expects," she said. "The children stay below with Maria and 3 guards. But we don't hide. We hunt." Lorenzo's smile was sharp as glass. "You want to use the yacht as a kill box." "I want to use Ricardo's confidence against him. He thinks we're soft now. Legitimate. Safe." Victoria checked her own weapon. Luciano had insisted she learn to shoot after the warehouse, and she'd become disturbingly proficient. "Let's remind him what we actually are." They had 4 minutes before the speedboats arrived. Luciano positioned the security team in strategic locations throughout the yacht's 5 decks. Lorenzo triggered the yacht's defensive measures, reinforced doors sealing the safe room, communications to the Conti mainland team, cameras streaming to multiple secure locations. Victoria took position in the engine room, the yacht's heart, where Ricardo would eventually come searching. She'd insisted on this role. Not because she was bait, those days were over, but because she was the trap's final spring. The hull shuddered as the speedboats came alongside. Gunfire. Shouting. The sounds of Luciano's team engaging Ricardo's men on the upper decks. Victoria waited in the dim engine room, her breathing controlled, her hands steady on the weapon. Ricardo came 20 minutes later, alone, having fought through the defenses with the desperate fury of vengeance. He looked like his father, same cruel eyes, same arrogance, and he smiled when he saw her. "Signora Conti, where are your children?" "Safe," Victoria said calmly. "But you're not." Ricardo's smile faltered as Lorenzo emerged from behind the starboard engines, weapon trained. Then Luciano from port side, closing the triangle. Ricardo was surrounded, outgunned, trapped in the heart of the yacht with nowhere to run. "You came for my children," Victoria said, her voice carrying the absolute cold she'd learned from Luciano. "That was your mistake. Everything else I can forgive, negotiate, let slide. But you threatened my babies, Ricardo. That debt is paid in blood." "Your father rotted in prison because of his arrogance," Lorenzo added. "You're about to learn the same lesson." Ricardo lunged for Victoria, his last desperate play, but she'd anticipated it. Her shot was precise, surgical, dropping him before he'd closed half the distance. Luciano and Lorenzo fired simultaneously, ensuring the threat would never rise again. The silence after the gunfire was profound. Victoria lowered her weapon, her hands still steady. Marco was crying somewhere above, probably frightened by the sounds. Alessia and Sofia would need comfort. There would be authorities to manage, evidence to arrange, the careful machinery of legitimate power deployed to ensure this incident disappeared into legal justification. But for now, Victoria stood between her husbands over the body of the man who'd threatened their children, and felt absolutely no remorse. "It's done," Luciano said. "The family is secure," Lorenzo confirmed. Victoria holstered her weapon and moved toward the stairs, toward her children who needed her. "Then let's go home." 5 years later, the Conti Empire was completely legitimate, their 5 children thriving, and Victoria couldn't remember the medical student she'd been before the black SUV had pulled up to her lecture hall. That girl had wanted safety, predictability, a conventional life. This woman, wife to 2 men, mother to 5 children, doctor and strategist and fierce protector, had chosen danger, complexity, and a love that defied every rule she'd once believed in. Standing in the palazzo garden watching her children play, Lorenzo's hand at her back and Luciano's presence a constant shadow, Victoria knew with absolute certainty. She wouldn't change a single thing. Love doesn't have to look the way the world expects. Sometimes the most powerful families are built on foundations that break every conventional rule. Sometimes one heart can hold 2 completely different loves with equal fierce devotion. And sometimes the life forced upon you becomes the destiny you'd choose again and again, in every lifetime. Victoria Rossi came to the Conti Palazzo as payment for her father's debts, a terrified medical student sold into an arrangement she never wanted. She expected to hate these men, to spend her years resenting the twins who'd claimed her as theirs. Instead, she discovered that love isn't about choosing. It's about accepting. Lorenzo became her North Star, her guide through the beautiful, dangerous world of power and legitimacy. Luciano became her shadow, her protector, the darkness that kept her light safe. And she became their completion, the missing piece that transformed 2 dangerous men into a family worth defending. Now, with children and an empire built on blood transformed into something their daughters can inherit with pride, Victoria understands the truth. The most extraordinary love stories are the ones written in defiance of every rule, protected by absolute devotion, and sealed with a choice made every single day. This is her family. This is her home. This is her destiny. Dangerous, unconventional, and absolutely perfect. Final message. Love doesn't have to look the way the world expects. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that break all the rules. Sometimes one heart can love 2 souls completely. And sometimes the life you never chose becomes the life you could never imagine living without. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to drop a comment telling me your favorite part you enjoyed most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.